Okay, this is a quick video of how to set up and play Intrepid. So in order to set up, we're first going to take the center console board. That's this cross tile board here. We're going to put that in the middle of the play area. We're then going to take our station boards. That's these outer space looking boards. We're going to put two on the left and two on the right. Those on the left should have the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the numbers on the right should be 5, 6, 7, and 8. We're then going to take our threat mat, that's right up here, it says threat on it. We're going to place that above the center console. We're going to take our station tokens. We're going to put the green one on the station integrity. We're going to put that at 9. And on the threat, depending on the difficulty level, we might start this at 10 for a regular game. Then we're going to take the tile tier mat. That's this guy here that shows us we can unlock various tiers. We're going to place that below the center console. Now it's time for every player to choose a resource mat. That's these mats here with the large wheel. There are 4 of them, each represent a different resource. You're going to select one primarily based on the ability that's mentioned here in the top left. After you select your mat, you're going to change the number here in the bottom left to -6. So if it's, say here at -9, we'll just spin the wheel down here until it gets to -6. Every player also needs to select a little nation mat. What's very important in a 4-player game is that you have 2 that are set to A and 2 that are set to B. That way we are generating the right amount of all the resources. So I might select the United States here. Where then each player is going to take their 3 resource tokens. We're going to take the red token, we're going to put it on top of the -6 here on our resource board. We're going to take the white one, we're going to put it in the first space next to our dice. That's going to tell us how many dice we're going to roll each round. And then we'll take the blue token, we'll put it at the 0 of this capacity track here on the right of our resource board. Then we're going to take our dice. Everyone will have a different set of dice. We'll put them by our resource board. We're then going to take our station tiles. These are the tiles associated with our country. We can tell those by the flags, of course, on the tile. What you're going to want to do is you're going to divide up the tiles based on the tier number. So we have tier 1, we have tier 2, tier 3, 4, and finally 5. All right, we want to separate those out. Our tier 1 tiles, we're going to place anywhere on the station board. We want to put them close to us, and we want to orient them so we, since we'll be the ones placing on these, can read them easily. So I might put these right here, for example. We'll take our tier 2 tiles, and we'll shuffle them up, and we'll draw 3. And this will form our personal offer row. Everyone will make their own. The other tier 2 tiles we can place back in the box. We won't be using those. All right, now it's time to prepare the disaster deck. So we'll grab the disaster cards here. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a deck. It's first going to have the disaster intro card. We can actually flip that up and everyone can read that. That's going to tell us a little bit of how this disaster is going to play. We're then going to take the level 1 disaster cards. We'll shuffle those, take 2. We can get rid of the other cards, we won't need those. Take the level 2 cards, shuffle those up, we'll take 3, put those below the level 1. The level 3 cards, shuffle those up, draw 3, put those below the level 2, and finally from the level 4, we'll just shuffle them up, take 1, and put it at the bottom. All right, so that's the disaster deck. Finally, we need to take the resupply cards. They say emergency resupply on them. We're going to shuffle them up. And we'll also place those to the side. All right, and with that, we're ready to play the game. All right, so playing around consists of the following 5 steps. First, every player is going to simultaneously roll and place their dice. Once we're done with that phase, we're going to count up all our resources, see how we did. We're then going to flip over a new disaster card, see what happens. Then, assuming we survive, we're going to spend any capacity we generated that round, and finally we'll reset the round and get ready for the next round. So let's talk about each one of those individually. So first off, rolling and placing our dice. So each player is going to roll the number of dice indicated on their nation mat, and it's whatever number is below this little white resource cube. So in this case, I'm the United States, I'm going to be rolling 2 dice at the beginning. So every player simultaneously rolls their dice, and then you can place your dice on tiles. Now let's talk about these tiles a little bit. So each tile has a dice slot on it. You can place a dice on a dice slot. On the slot, it will tell you what can go into it. So for example, if it says 1 through 6, you can put any dice on there, no problem. Other times, it might say something like this, 3 through 4, and so then you can only put a dice that's set to 3 or 4. So like I could put this 4 here, that's not a problem, but the 6 I couldn't put there. Some tiles, like this one, can only take 1 die. That's all. Once you place it there, this tile is full, it's done. Other times you have multiple dice slots. Here you can place 1 die, and then later, if you choose to, you can place a second die. It's up to you. You can place only 1, you can place both, up to you. The other situation is you have these double joint dice slots. In this case, you need to put both dice at the same time. These dice in this case need to be doubles. So like for example, if I have these 2 3s here, I get to place them here. If I only have 1 3, I couldn't place anything there. I need both of them at the same time to place them there. When you place your dice, you're going to immediately execute the ability that's listed down here at the bottom. So like for example, if I place this 4 here, I'm going to gain a new die equal to, this symbol means the dice I just placed, plus or minus 1. So again, I place a 4 here, I could take a new die immediately, and I'm going to set it to that 4 plus or minus 1. So maybe I set it to a 3, and now I have this 3 that I can use. Now if I say place this 3 here, I can execute that ability again. Because for each time I place a die here, I'm going to execute this ability. Right? So I place a 3 there, and perhaps I get a new dice set to a 2. And now I can go ahead and place that 2. So some tiles like this are going to give you dice back as you're placing them, and you could just keep going. And you want to hit these every time because they're going to also earn you some resources, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, when I place 2 dice on this, even though I'm placing 2 dice, because they're joined, I'm only going to get this once, right? So it says here, total dice. So when I do that, 1 time I can do this ability. In this case, I may decrease a die currently at 5 by 1. So if I have a dice that I already rolled, it's at a 5, and I want it to be a 4, I could use that ability. It's a pretty limited ability, but it could come in handy at some point. So as you're going along, you're going to be placing dice. You're going to be triggering its ability. So I put that on there. I'm going to take a 5 back, and I put the 5 here, get a 6 back, and now I have 2 6s, which I could place up here. Right, so we're placing dice, triggering abilities. You also might want to place dice on emergency resupply cards. They have dice slots. We'll talk about these in a little bit. And you might need to place dice on disaster cards. We'll talk about those in a little bit as well. Another place you can place dice is on this tile tier. So if you want to unlock additional tiers, you need to place 2 dice here. If you want to unlock a tier 4, you're going to need to place 4 dice here, on and on. Another thing you can do is you can share dice. Let's say, for example, I'm playing United States and I cannot make myself doubles. I just do not have the ability to do that. What I might need to do then is request a dice from someone else. So let's say I have a 2 and I have a 6, and that's going to be really hard for me to make these into doubles. So I might say to my teammates, hey, does anyone have either a 2 or a 6? They can help me out. And perhaps another teammate says, oh, sure, no problem. I have a 2. What they're going to do is they're going to place their die here. Now, I don't pick up and take that die, because once I do that, this tile has now been satisfied. Instead, I take a new die from my supply, I set it to the same number, and now I have that die to work with. So yeah, I place those there, and now maybe I don't need this 6 anymore, so I say, oh, would you like a 6 back? That person says, sure. I place a 6 there, they take a new die from their supply, set it to a 6, and now they have that dice to work with. So that's how we can share dice. If you have any extra dice left over, perhaps in future rounds I've rolled more than 2 dice, I don't only have places that I can use 2 dice, I have some extra dice left over, all unused dice go here in the habitation module. One thing to note here, some tiles like this one give you a flat bonus. So like this one, for every dice we place there, we're going to get +3. It doesn't matter what dice we place there. While other ones are going to have this symbol here, which means it depends on the dice you placed here. That symbol always means the dice you placed here. So for this one, for example, if I placed a 2 here, we get power equal to this dice, which is a 2, plus 1. So we generate 3 power. However, if I placed a 4 there, we generate 4 plus 1, so we generate 5. So that's significantly better. So whenever you have a tile that looks like that, you're going to want to put the best dice you possibly can here. That's where sharing dice becomes very important, so you can get the best possible outcome. Alright, so once all dice are placed, either on tiles, on emergency resupply cards, on disaster cards, on a tier unlock tile, or finally in the habitation module in the center of the center console, it's time to count up our resources. Alright, in this case what we're going to do is we're going to go around one at a time, and we're going to do each resource on the resource map one at a time. So for example, if we were counting climate, I'd come here, I'd look at this, and say, okay, we generated 6 climate, right? That's the climate symbol plus 6. All right. In this case, because it's total die, because both these dies come together, it's just going to be 6. Whereas here, on this tile, this is power. For each die, we're going to generate 3 power. So here, if we use both these slots, which we really should, there's really not a good reason not to use both those slots, we're going to generate a total of 6 power, because it's 3 for each die. In this case here, because even though it's 2 dice, because they're joined together, we're just getting the 6. All right, so as we add that up, I'm going to use this little red cube on my resource map, and I'm going to move that up to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perhaps another player generated 5, so we keep going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Once we've counted up everyone, now we can include the bonus for the habitation module. For every die in the habitation module, we can add 1 to any one resource. So for example, let's say we had 2 dice in the habitation module. We couldn't split those up. They all have to go into a single resource. So perhaps we use those into climate. So climate is currently at 5. There's 2 dice in the habitation module. That's going to go up to 7. All right, once we're done adding everything up, it's time to calculate our capacity. Capacity is pretty easy to calculate. It's just the lowest of our 4 resources. So for example, if we made 10 oxygen, 12 power, 8 nutrition, and 7 climate, 7 would be our lowest, so everyone would generate 7 climate. So each player would increase their capacity by 7. Now, in some cases, you can unlock a bonus. So you can see here on the resource board that we have these bonuses. They're also highlighted in different colors along here along the track. But if during a round we made it all the way up to 15 on climate, then we can unlock this bonus, which is decrease the drain on any one resource by 1. So that's pretty great. Once we do that, that bonus is done. We'll put a little token on it to indicate that we can't use that bonus again. But if we get all the way up to 22, we unlock the next one. If we get all the way up to 30, and so on and so forth. So this is when we trigger those resource bonuses as we unlock them. Finally, if we've used any tiles that help us decrease the threat. Let me give you an example of that. Here's one of those such tiles. So you don't start with any of them, but you can buy them later on. And when we need to place a 4 here because it's the only dice it will take. But when we do, it's going to decrease the threat by 1. So once we can count all that up, and we decrease the threat by 1. Okay? And so that's the end for counting resources. Once we're done counting resources, it's time to flip over the disaster card. Now there are 2 different types of disaster cards. There are momentary disaster cards and persistent disaster cards. Persistence you're identified by this little persistent icon in the top left. What we're going to do is we're going to read the effects of the card. So like let's say we flipped over this Meteor Strike card. It's going to tell us we're going to roll the disaster die one time. Right, so we roll that. Okay, we got a 7. Then we're going to hit all tiles in the sectors equal to the disaster die and the disaster die plus 1. So in this case, we'd hit all tiles in sectors 7 and 8. So if we had some tiles over there on 7 and 8, what we do is we place these disaster tokens on each one of them. Now that's bad for a number of reasons. Number one, next time we count up resources from these tiles, each disaster token on a tile is worth -1. So like for example, this tile here by itself generates 10 climate. It's a pretty good tile. But if we have a disaster token on it, it's now only generating 9. If we have 2 disaster tokens on it, it's now only generating 8, and so on. So it's just going to get worse. Even worse than that is if you ever have a tile that has 4 disaster tokens on it, that tile is now deactivated, meaning you cannot use it next round or any subsequent round until you perhaps repair that tile by removing one of the disaster tokens. And we'll talk about how to do that in just a minute. If it even gets worse and you put a 5th disaster token on a tile, that tile is now in fact destroyed. It means you pick it up, you take it off the board, it's gone for good. So you got to be careful how many tiles you let, or how many tokens you let go on a tile. So we roll the disaster dice, we hit all the dice in disaster die equal and disaster die plus 1, and now it says we need to disable one active tile that was just hit. So maybe of these 2 tiles, they were just both hit. We're going to choose, well, those are both really good tiles. I don't really like that, but I got to pick one of them and I'm going to disable it. So that one takes 2 dice, it's a double. That one's hard to get into, so we're going to place this token here. And when that indicates this tile will be disabled for the following round. Once we come back to flipping the disaster card, the next round we can take this off and this tile will be available for us to use again. But for now, it's disabled. So that's what a card looks like that. Now you see down here, we have this symbol and we say disable one additional tile. What this means is if we did a station overload. All right, let me tell you about that. So we got station integrity up here. Right now it's set to 9. What that means is we can generate up to and including 9 capacity each round. So each one of our resources can generate up to and including 9. If at the end of the round, all of our resources went above 9, so meaning we made more than 9 capacity at the end of the round, well then we would have done a station overload. We pushed the system too hard, and so we would trigger this additional effect. So normally we disable one active tile. In this case, we're going to disable an additional active tile. So pushing the system too hard can really have some negative consequences. With these persistent cards, it still works the same way. We're going to read this. We're going to hit all tiles that produce power. So any tile that produces power, like this one, we're going to go ahead and hit. Now, unlike this other card, with this card, once we're done, it goes to this card pile. We're done with that disaster. This card is going to stay out, and it's going to stay in effect until we resolve it. So on a future round, we can either prevent it by placing a die set at 4 here, and what that means is this effect will not go into effect this round. However, that card will stay there, and we'll need to either prevent it or resolve it on future rounds as well. So that's what prevent does. It's a little easier to do, but you're just kind of kicking the can down the road. It's a problem that's still going to be there. Or we can resolve it, which means that card is now discarded. We're done with it. So in order to resolve this card, for example, we need to destroy one active tile. So we'd look at all our tiles and go, okay, is there one tile we can live without? Because that will help us get rid of this card. That might be worth it, because placing a die there each round is going to be a pain. So maybe let's just go ahead and take this tile and destroy it, which means it's gone. It's out of the game. So that's what persistent cards mean. Now, when we flip over a card, we'll do this, we'll enact its effects, then we'll look to see if we have any other persistent cards, and maybe they need to be enacted as well. So maybe we didn't prevent or resolve this card in a previous round, so now we're going to do this again a second time. So we're going to do that each round until it's resolved. All right, so now that we've dealt with the disasters, it's time to spend our capacity. So this is where things get a little happier for us. So let's say in this case we have 7 capacity. Well, what can we do with that? Well, there are a number of things. First off, we can buy tiles from our offer row. Now, you probably remember during setup, we selected 3 tier 2 tiles at random. So we can purchase any of those. The price is here in the top left. So this one costs 7, this one costs 5, this one costs 6. Now also, when you buy a tile, it's going to increase the drain on something. So like for example, if I buy this, it's going to cost me 7 capacity, but it's also going to increase the drain on nutrition by 2. So whoever had the nutrition resource board would move theirs from -6 up to a -8. So that means next round it's going to be that much harder to generate that resource. So that's going to be pretty ugly. But this is going to help us generate an awful lot of power. So you got to weigh the pros and cons. You're going to have to buy tiles throughout the game. So don't worry about that too much. Just make sure you're keeping it in mind as you're buying tiles. Another thing you can do is you can upgrade tiles. So like we have this tile here. This is what it does. It gives us a new die and it gives us +3. If we upgrade it, we're just going to flip the tile over. And now we can see, well, it's still giving us +3, it's still giving us a new die, but now we can put 3 dice into it. Which means if we put all 3 dice on that tile, instead of generating a total of 6, we're now going to generate a total of 9, because it's for each dice we place there. And each time we place a dice there, we're going to get a new dice back. So it's very, very flexible. It's going to gain us a lot more power, so that's a pretty good thing. Now when we upgrade a tile, it costs us 5, that's indicated by this little icon here, and we just flip the tile over. If the tile was already hit, it still remains hit. It doesn't go away. So that's unfortunate, but that's how it works. Another thing we can do is we can upgrade our dice. So you see here we start with 2 dice. We can spend 4 capacity to up to a 3. We can spend 5 to get 4 dice, and we can spend 6 to get all the way up to 5 dice. So we can keep upgrading our dice, which we're going to need as we buy new tiles. We're going to need new dice to be able to place on those tiles. So buying new dice is very important. Also, we'll need new dice if we want to upgrade more tiers. We're going to need more dice to deal with persistent disaster cards. We're going to need dice to deal with emergency cards. So having more dice is very useful. Another thing we can do is we can repair tiles that have already been hit. So like for example, let's say this tile here has been hit 4 times. It's now deactivated. That's bad. I really need that tile. That tile is very, very useful for me. So on the very first card of the disaster deck, it's going to show us that we can spend 5 capacity to remove 1 disaster token from a tile. So this guy is currently deactivated because it has 4. I can spend 5 of my capacity. So I'll just subtract 5 from my total here. So I'm currently at 7. I'll go down to 2. And now I can get rid of one of these. And thankfully, because it only has 3 now, that card is no longer deactivated and I can reuse it again. Another thing you can do is if a tile has become disabled. It has a disabled token on it and you can't use it. Here it is, my disabled token. And I really need to use that tile. Well, what you can do is you can spend, but then I can remove this disabled token and I'd be able to use that tile again. So that would be repairing damaged tiles. The last thing we can do, and we've talked about this a little bit, is we can flip over one of these emergency resupply cards. Sometimes during the game, you're not doing very well, you haven't made very much capacity, you really need some capacity so you can boost yourself up for the next round, right? What you can do is you can flip over one or more of these emergency resupply cards. You flip it over, and it's going to immediately tell you a benefit. You're going to take that right away. So this benefit, for example, is each player gains 2 capacity. Well, boy, in a round we only made 3 capacity. 2 more can make all the difference in the world, because that might be enough to help us upgrade a tile or remove one of these hit tokens off a really important tile. So an additional 2 capacity is a big bonus. The downside with these emergency resupply cards is they each have a cost. This cost in case is we need 3 dice. Now you notice here it says player 2, player 3, player 4. What that means is we need 3 different players to place their dice here. No one player can do all 3. So next round, we're going to have to place 3 dice on this card. If we don't do that, say we're unable to or we choose not to, what's going to happen here is we're going to deal with this failure situation. In this case, it's subtract 18 from the oxygen intake. That means the next time we're counting up our resources, we need to spend 18 capacity. We need to subtract 18 oxygen, sorry. So meaning if we made, say we did really, really good and we made 20 oxygen, well, we subtract 18, we only made 2. More than likely what that means is we've only made say 8 oxygen, we subtract 18, we're now negative 10, and as we'll talk about in a minute, that means we lose the game. So making sure you don't deal with these failure situations is very, very important. So emergency resupply cards, they can be a big benefit, but they can also hold a big toll. So you got to be careful when you decide to flip those over. All right, once we're done spending our capacity, it's time to reset the round. So that's very, very easy. All we're going to do, first we're going to reclaim our dice. So let's say we had dice placed on this tile here. We had some dice in the middle. We're going to take all those back. And then we're just going to reset our resources. What that means is we're going to take this cube and we're going to put it back to where it says reset here, the bottom leftmost spot. Now, it had someone bought a tile that drained climate. This would have slid up, and perhaps it's -8. Then we'd start at -8. Perhaps someone bought another one, so perhaps it starts at -10 in a future round. Then we're always going to start reset down to this space, whatever that is where you're starting. So the beginning is going to start at -6, but as this wheel spins, it's going to get more and more drain, so it's going to be harder and harder each round. So once that's reset, we're ready to go. We're back up to the top. We're going to roll our dice. We're going to place. We're going to keep going. So when does the game end? Well, there's a few situations. First off, if we can ever get our threat all the way down to 0, congratulations, you've won the game. That is the goal. There are 2 situations where you can lose the game. First off, if you ever go to draw a disaster card, but there are not any disaster cards left in the deck, then you've lost the game. So that means when you flip over the last disaster card, it's going to be a level 4. It's going to be really, really ugly because they just get worse each level. You flip that over, you're going to play the next round, but at the end of the next round, when you go to draw that card, if you don't have that threat all the way down to 0 by the end of that turn, it's game over, you've lost the game. The other situation is if you ever, after counting up all your resources, are ever still in this negative, in the red zone here on your resource meter. Say we end at -4 in climate. Well, bad news, you do not generate enough climate to keep you safe in the dangers of space, and you've lost the game. So it's very important that when you're generating your resources, you generate as much as you possibly can. So as long as you avoid going to negative here, and you can get that threat down to 0 before you run out of these cards, you'll win the game, you'll do a great job. Just watch out for disasters. Quick rundown of each of the nations and kind of how they work. Each nation, the important things to note on these nation mats. First off, the complexity level. So we're going to start with complexity level 1, means it's very, very simple. All the way up to complexity level 4 means it's a little more complex. Also here with the A and B, you're going to want to make sure in a 4-player game you have 2 players that have one set to A and 2 players that have one set to B. Otherwise you won't be generating enough resources, you'll have a big problem. So make sure you got that under control. On here on the nation mats, it's going to tell you how many starting tiles you have. US, for example, has 2 starting tiles, and how many dice you're going to start with. You can always see that's the first slot here. All right, so the US is going to start with 2 dice, and they have these 2 tiles. They have other tiles that give them a new dice that's equal to 1 greater or 1 less than the dice that's placed here. And then you have other tiles that want doubles. That's very common for the US. So for example, if I was to roll these numbers here, I rolled a 4 and a 6, well, I need doubles. So I might place a 6 here. I'm going to get a new dice from my supply. I'm going to set it to a 5. And now I have a 4 and a 5. I'm getting close. I can place one here, get a new dice, set it to a 4. So I did 5 minus 1 is 4. So I now have 2 dice that I can place here. And that would be a good starting turn for the US. Russia's also going to start with 2 dice, but in this case they're going to have 3 tiles. Russia has tiles that are going to let them re-roll. So they're going to start with 2 dice, and this tile here you can see is going to give us nutrition equal to the dice we place on it. So it can take any number, 1 through 6, but as you can guess, we really want a high number, preferably a 6 on there. So we might roll our dice. We got a 1 through 4. Okay, well, neither of these are especially high, so we might place out 1 here. That's going to allow us to roll a new dice. Oh, look, now we got a 6. That's great. So we're going to go ahead and place that 6 there. We might as well place that there. Roll a new dice. Doesn't really matter what it is. And this tile here can take a 1 through 6, but notice it gives us oxygen equal to 4, no matter what number we place on it. So we can do that, in which case we did a really good job for Russia. Okay, for Germany, they have 3 tiles, like most countries. They also roll 6 dice. That sounds like a lot of dice, but as you'll quickly see, they don't get access to all of them. So they're going to roll their 6 dice, and all these dice start locked in storage. What that means is they need to spend an equal number of pips on dice to get dice out. So like for example, they could remove this 6 here, and spend that, get rid of it. Now they have this 2 and this 4 that they can use on their tiles. Alternately, if they really wanted that 6, say they want to put it on this tile here that needs a high number, they could spend a 2 and a 4 and get a 6 out. They can put that there. If they want to get very clever, what they can do is they can, for example, they want to spend this 4, they could pull out these 2 2s and put it on this tile, because this tile, as you can see, allows them to take a dice from storage. So when they do that, they can now get this 6. They don't need to spend for it. They take it out of storage, and now they can put that there. So using their tiles and spending dice, they can pull dice out of storage. All right, next up we have Canada. Canada also has 3 tiles, and Canada rolls 5 dice. But similar to Germany, when they roll their dice, some number of them are going to be locked in storage. In the case of Canada, all the odd numbered dice are going to be locked in storage. So for example, these 2 3s will be locked away. This 4 and the 2 2s will be available for them. Before Canada places any dice, they can choose to re-roll all of their dice. So perhaps I don't like these dice. I can then choose to re-roll them all, but now I'm stuck with this, and now I have 4 1s, which that would be a pretty tough situation for Canada to be in. Canada has some tiles that let them take dice out of storage, and that is the only way Canada can pull dice out of storage. So for example, when I place any even numbered die on here, maybe I'll take 2 dice out of storage. So then I can pull these out, I can place these as they need to go. Canada has also other tiles that let them roll dice into storage and manipulate their dice while they're in storage. Once they're out, they pretty much just need to be placed. Okay, Japan has 3 tiles, and they only roll 2 dice. Now when Japan rolls their dice, unlike any other country, they need to lock them in the orientation that they were rolled. You can't turn them around, because Japan actually manipulates the dice in the 3D space that these dice exist. Japan is primarily looking for 3s. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take a die, you might look at it a little bit, kind of figure out where that 3 is on the die, and then you're going to place it on a tile. For example, when I place a dice on this tile, I'm going to gain a new die. I'm going to orient it exactly like that. So I got a 6 on top and a 3 facing me, and then I'm going to tilt it up. So up means away from me, so I tilt it, and now I have a 3 that I can place here. I want to do that again, so maybe I'm going to do this. I place that 1 there. I set a new die exactly oriented like that. I tilt it up. Now I have a 4. Place a 4 here. A new die oriented exactly like that. This is going to tilt left, so I tilt it like that. Then I place that there. Get a new die oriented exactly the same. Tilt left again, and now I have another 3. So that's how Japan would work. All right, Brazil has 3 tiles, and they're going to roll 5 dice. Sounds like a lot of dice, and unlike Germany and Canada, none of the dice are going to be locked away. The trick with Brazil is that some of their tiles are going to be locked away. Any tile that has this symbol on it is unlocked and can be used right away for Brazil. All their other tiles need to have these lock tokens placed on them. So before we roll our dice, we're going to place some lock tokens on our tiles. So maybe we put this 1, 2, and 4 there. We put the 5, 6, and 3 here. Now we're going to roll our dice. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this tile. It allows us to unlock tiles with a lock equal to whatever dice we place there. So like for example, I might place this 3 right here. That's going to unlock the tile with the 3 lock on it. So here, this tile has a 3 lock. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. Even though it has other locks, this tile is now unlocked, and I can place any die I want on there. This tile can take a 1, 3, or 4, so maybe I put a 3 there. But now I need to get into this one, so I might place a 2 there, which unlocks this, and now I can place on this tile here. So that's the basics of Brazil. So moving on to the UK. UK is our first 4-star complexity. UK actually has 2 tiles that it starts with that have this little space here. Now it looks similar to a dice slot space, but it's a little bit different. Because before we roll any dice, in fact at the very beginning of the game, we're going to place dice set to 3 there. Those are actually counter dice, so we're not going to roll those. Instead, we're going to roll our 2 dice. And now these are what we have to work with. All right. What we need to do is we need to place a die next to a counter die that's greater than the counter die. So like for example, let's say instead of this 1, this was a 4, we could place that 4 there. Now this 3 we can't place anywhere because it's not greater than the counter on that tile. But what we can do is we can pull this dice from the tile and we can start it over and put it back to 1. Well, now that's really easy to get into. We can place that there. And then perhaps we place this die here. Now, when we do that, you're thinking, well, why wouldn't you do that every time? That's really easy. It's because these tiles, when they generate resources, they're going to generate resources not based on the die you placed here, but based on the counter. Right? So this is going to generate nutrition equal to the counter plus 1. So if we have a counter set to 1, that's only generating 2 nutrition, which is not incredibly great. Once we're done placing our dice, of course we collect our die off regular tiles, just like normal. But here, with the counter dice, what we're going to do is we're actually going to slide the dice we placed on it over, and that becomes the new counter. So our next round, we have a 4 here and a 3 there. 4 is going to be better because, of course, we're generating off that 4 instead of 3, but it's also going to be harder to get into. So with the UK, you need to be really careful about how quickly you're pulling dice, because you don't want everything to be at a 1, you're not going to generate a lot of resources, but also you don't want everything too high or you won't be able to place anything. Alright, last up we have Malaysia. Malaysia has 3 tiles and we're going to roll 4 dice. Now the trick with Malaysia is that they have some tiles, like this one here, that whenever you place dice on it, you're going to increase all unplaced dice by 1. So they're all going to go up by 1. And then you have other tiles that decrease all unplaced dice by 1. So for example, on this one here, we might put a 6 here and a 4 here. But all these other dice are now going to go up by 1. So this becomes a 5, and this becomes a 5. All right, well, that's not great for this because this needs nice small numbers. In fact, this is going to generate climate equal to 6 minus the number we place in there. So placing a 5, even if we could place it there, wouldn't be very good. Thankfully, we have tiles like this that allow us to increase or decrease all unplaced dice by 2. So what we do, we put a 5 here, we decrease this down to a 3, and then we're going to gain a new die equal to the dice we placed in there, so we get our 5 back, basically. Well, we still can't get into that, so we're going to place this 3 here to decrease this by 2, and then we're going to get our 3 back. Well, now we have 2 3s that we at least can place in there. So while that's not a 1, we prefer those to be 1s. At least allows us to place on the tile, and that's how we can manipulate Malaysian's dice.